Baby, you listening to the Powell Movement.
Welcome to the Powell Movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and for the first time in a long time, I've had a little taste of freedom. And you know what? It tasted amazing. Now that I have my vaccine, it's all about celebrating what America is all about to me. Freedom, smoked tri-tips on my Traeger grill, friends who enjoy my meat in their mouths, and ice-cold 10-barrel and Stanley pint glasses. And I experienced all of this freedom because I believe in science. Does that make me right about this whole pandemic and my belief that the vaccine is going to minimize my risk of getting sick or dying? It sure doesn't, but it also doesn't make me a sheep for following what scientists say is the right thing to do. I mean, I'd rather listen to a scientist than an anti-vaxxer any day because, to be honest, I haven't heard a good argument from a smart anti-vaxxer yet. They usually just insult me and my intelligence, and that's totally fine. They can think I'm dumb for believing science to the government. What do I care? And while I won't say it to their faces, I think they're dumb too. But you know what? Who cares? Dumb people can be my friends. They just can't come to my barbecue. So while I won't say the whole pandemic is over, my attitude has drastically changed with the new mask rules. And life will be back to normal for the Powells once my kid gets his shot in July. That's what he wants for his 12th birthday present, which is music to this Jewish dad's ears, as the shot is free. Shit, I'm going to get him 2 of the shots. So this is going to be my last rant on COVID for a while, hopefully. And I say that knowing that it could come back up after the infection rate starts getting way bigger. And speaking of the potential of the sickness factor going way bigger, my guest this week is known for going huge on his skis in the park, bleeding for the sport with gnarly urban, and he's just starting to put things together in the backcountry. Alex Hall is a throwback. This 23-year-old has a bag of tricks, medals, and video parts, and it doesn't seem like one part of the sport is more important than another to Alex. He loves everything about skiing. He's gone from the future of slopestyle to the present in the sport in a matter of years, and he can definitely stay there, but that is a hard thing to do, and we are going to talk about it all on the podcast. Before we get into it, I want to ask you to tell a friend about the podcast. While podcasts are amazing, they're hard things to find, and all skiers and snowboarders, well, they're going to love this podcast, I hope, or they're going to hate me, one of the two. And if you do have a friend that skis or snowboards and needs to know about the podcast, please tell them, because if you do, then they will find it. I know they will go through my catalog, and that will be one more listener to the Powell Movement. All of those things help, and I greatly appreciate you doing that for me. I'd also like you to follow me on Instagram at the Powell Movement. I'm trying to get to that 10,000 follower mark, and I'm pretty close, so every single person that follows me helps, so thank you for that as well. Finally, I want all of you to support my sponsors. They really do make this thing happen, and I really do love all of these brands. They are Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, the 10-Barrel Brewery, Rollerblade, and Stanley. Now, let's talk with Alex Hall. Jumping into it, I got a late start on my research on this one. Where you and I had said we were going to do this podcast a long time ago, I got caught up with spring break and all this shit going on in life. And the only way to catch up, I thought, was to listen to the other podcasts that you were on. Normally, I don't do that because I look at that as cheating. But I didn't get much out of that podcast other than a ton of talk about your Real Ski X Games medal, which I already knew about. Luckily, we moved the podcast out a little bit and I had some time to do the research, and I'm stoked to really tell your story. And the most recent part of your story is Real Ski. So I'll keep it a little bit different than your other podcasts, but with Real Ski, you didn't get an invite right off the bat in 2020. Does that kind of stuff piss you off? Like they should have had you there based on the way you were skiing?
No, not too much. I mean, I was definitely a little bummed when I heard I didn't get the invite for the Real Ski in 2020. I mean, there's skiers out there and people who have earned it and deserve it, and so many people who could put out an amazing part that I was kind of like, oh, it's all good. Hopefully my time will come.
But didn't they come to you after the fact, after they had already declined your invite or not given you an invite and said, hey, Alex, we really want you in this now. Maybe someone got hurt or something happened and they were scrambling and you were able to be like, no, I'm actually not going to do the X Games. Does that actually feel good when you like turn something down like that?
That did happen. I don't know if it feels good, but yeah, I think someone in the original lineup got hurt and they ended up throwing me an invite. A lot of people had already been filming some stuff. So I felt like I was kind of just getting a late start on it, and then with all the comps that I'd kind of already agreed to do, it just would have been pretty hard to pull it off as well as I wanted to do it, and I've kind of told myself that if I did end up doing a reel ski, I'd want to put 100% of my effort into it and really take the time to do it and do it as well as I could. Because a lot of the time you really only get one shot at it. So I wanted to do it as good as I could. Yeah, so I ended up actually declining that re-invite in 2020 just because I kind of felt like I couldn't execute the video as good as I really wanted. So I was like, yeah, I can't do it this year, but I have to do it in one of the upcoming years, like in the future, if you guys ever have another spot available. And then they hit me up the next summer, and I got the ball rolling pretty early on whether I would do it or not.
You end up in reel ski, and to me, when I look at you winning an X Games medal here, you've won an X Games medal in Aspen at the big dance, winning a slopestyle X Games. How does it feel winning reel ski compared to winning a real, not a real X Games medal, because they're both real medals, but winning one at a real X Games?
It's definitely pretty different. For reel ski, you don't have like the big crowd and celebration there to witness the big moment. And when you're doing it in person, there's a pretty big crowd there, and it all kind of happens so quick, whereas reel ski, something that you've been working towards for months on end, and you kind of know the footage you're sitting on. And for us, we knew we had some pretty good stuff, so we were hoping to hopefully at least get a medal. And the whole way it goes down is a little less kind of a big moment or a big reveal, if you kind of want to put it that way. So winning events in person is definitely a whole different vibe to it, where it's just crazy. It all goes down like in 1 second, especially when I won that slopestyle in Aspen in 2019. That was the first X Games medal I got, and it was a gold in slopestyle in Aspen, which is kind of like the big event I've been watching my whole life growing up. So it was kind of a pretty crazy moment, and it didn't really hit me until quite a bit later. I'd say almost like days or weeks later that I was like, damn, I actually won the X Games. But they definitely got different feels, both good in their different ways. Definitely pretty different though, for sure.
Yeah, I guess if you were to win reel ski first, because when you're able to win the X Games first, and that's your bucket list item of your childhood, once that registers in your brain, it's like, wow, that was the big thing I wanted to do with my life, given the Olympics are out there as well. But the X Games are what you grow up wanting to do, and that real Aspen X Games win is probably going to trump anything that you do in your career, unless you win an Olympic gold. And I think that'll be a different feeling that only Joss can explain at this point. I guess there's others that can explain it as well. But if you look at the edits of that X Games and you had to pick 1, 2, 3, who do you pick?
Well, I'm not going to put I don't know. My favorite for sure from the rest of them was Alex Hackle. I just think him and his filmer, Pabin, put out such incredible work together, and theirs was just above and beyond. I mean, they had a really, really amazing entry the year before. Hackle ended up getting third, and then I knew they were going to bring it super hard this year, and they put out an amazing video. And as well as all the others, I mean, I enjoyed so many of them. I thought it was sick to see Tanner make a full, go super hard, hit the urban, hit the pow, and put out a part. Lupe killed it. So I don't know. Top 3 is hard because I think especially this year with the format being the POW and the urban or the park kind of being whatever you wanted to film made it especially hard, and for the judges too. So I think picking the top 3 is always going to be tough. But if I had to pick my favorite of the bunch, it'd probably be Hackles.
Gotcha. And kids on the internet, they were shitting that Tanner got third place, like he definitely shouldn't have been there. But it's Tanner Hall, and he's not winning it by any means, but pretty amazing to see a dude like that. And when you think about it, he's kind of like you, who he's got the contest background. He's not afraid of gnarly urban, and he never has been. And it's always been about what he's wanted to do, not what other people have kind of pushed him into. Do you see a similarity between you and him, given different generations?
Yeah, maybe some similarities. I mean, I've always kind of aspired to be like some of the guys from the generations prior, where they were able to combine a lot of the different aspects in terms of competing, but then also filming all the time. And that's kind of who I've always looked up to, like Tanner and Henrik and all those guys who just are so good at doing everything. And that's kind of where I draw a lot of inspiration. And it was so sick to see Tanner in an event with a lot of us, where Tanner's I don't even know, 10, 15 years older than some of the guys.
He's old enough to be your dad.
Yeah, pretty much. So it was pretty inspirational to see him do that event. And for everyone that kind of thought he shouldn't have gotten third, or I don't know exactly what was going down, but I saw some controversy about that. I think it's just hard to judge. I think a lot of people were super used to the format being that full urban video because it's been like that the last 4 or 5 years. And then having those POW shots kind of threw a lot of people for a loop. I think some people weren't too hyped that I had some POW shots in mind, but I think that was maybe the main thing. People thought Tanner's maybe was less good because it had a lot of POW footage, but I mean, if you look at what he did in the POW, it was pretty freaking gnarly. So I think third place was definitely a tough one because there's so many good videos. But honestly, I wasn't surprised when I saw Tanner got third. I was kind of expecting that. But yeah, I mean, maybe I wasn't a viewer from the outside, so I was like not really too worried about who exactly was going to be on the podium. I was just hyped that everyone made amazing videos, and that was kind of the main thing I saw when there was like some internet hate or controversy or whatever you want to call it, was that, I don't know, I was just thinking people should be more hyped and appreciative of just all the hard work that these athletes have put in the last couple months, because everyone, gave it all they had, and like Tanner and some of the other people got pretty injured along the way. So I think, I don't know, just appreciating all the entries for what they are is pretty dope. But I mean, on top of that, I do think it's really cool that people get so involved, and it really shows that people care a lot about that event and care about the outcomes. That's pretty awesome to see people so involved in the real ski deal and like the whole video aspect of things.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing, and all the edits, like you said, came out phenomenal. But that's all we're going to talk about with Real Ski. You win an X Games medal there. We're going to start out with your life, and you're born in the States in Alaska, but you moved to Switzerland when you're 1. And do you grow up feeling like you're totally European?
Yeah. So I grew up in Fairbanks, and then don't remember any of that because I moved when I was 1. So yeah, I'd say I felt pretty Euro for most of my childhood growing up. Lived kind of mostly in Zurich, and then moved a little to the outskirts of Zurich. But I was there from age 1 to 16, did school there, and spoke German with all my friends and in school. So definitely had some pretty Swiss roots growing up. I still spoke English at home with my parents, but for the most part, I felt pretty Swiss, except for the odd vacation here and there where I'd go to the U.S. and see my dad's side of the family in Salt Lake City.
Citizenship-wise, do you have 2 passports?
Yeah. So I have a U.S. passport, obviously, because I was born in the U.S., but then my mom's a full-blown Italian, so I got my Italian passport maybe when I was like 14 or something. So I got dual citizenship, Italian and American, but I don't have a Swiss passport. I actually could get one. I just haven't really decided to pull the trigger. I haven't felt like I need the Swiss passport necessarily because I got the Italian one, which does me pretty good in most parts of Europe. So I've just been sticking to having 2.
Do you use the Italian one because you don't want to be confused with other Americans?
Sometimes I use it. Honestly, it kind of depends. Just if there's like a huge line at the border control or something in the airport, I'll whip out my Italian passport to get through quicker sometimes if I got a tight connection or something. But that's pretty much the extent to which I use the Italian passport. And then usually I'm just using the U.S. one just because I'm on the U.S. ski team. And like if we have to check into a hotel or something or those types of things, it's usually the U.S. passport that they want to see. So I travel with both, but I'm usually using the U.S. one.
Okay, and growing up, I would think that you have a different worldview than most skiers that are on the podcast, given that you grew up in Europe. Did you grow up thinking that all the U.S. people were like gun-toting, George Bush-loving idiots, for lack of a better term, and like people who are bringing guns to school on a weekly basis? I mean, do you see that and kind of like are almost scared of America?
No, not too bad. I mean, like I said, I spoke English at home, and like my dad's American, and I'd go to Salt Lake like maybe once a year. So it didn't feel like America was a super foreign thing. I've always felt pretty in touch with the U.S. and like what was going on. And I had a ton of family who lives kind of all over the U.S. So definitely didn't feel like that. I felt like I was more Swiss growing up, but the U.S. didn't feel like a whole foreign kind of adventure.
Okay. And you're in Switzerland because your parents are professors. Are they both skiers and really good athletes as well?
Yeah. So my parents both work at the University of Zurich, and they like to ski a lot. They actually met skiing when they were young on a ski touring trip in Italy. But my mom kind of picked a lot of that up because of my dad. She like grew up skiing a little bit. She grew up in Bologna, it's in northern Italy, but it's pretty far from the Alps. I'd say maybe a 3 or 4 hour drive from the Alps. So she'd go skiing every now and then, but not too much. And she's not super athletic. She definitely gets outside and she'll go touring a lot with my dad and stuff. But I wouldn't call her the craziest athlete, but my dad's side of the family is definitely super athletic. My dad growing up, I feel like he was kind of like an OG of doing tricks on skis and stuff. Like when he was a teenager, him and his friends would go up and ski alto and like do backflips and 360s and 7s. And there's a bunch of old videos that I'd always watch when I'd go visit my grandparents in the U.S. They'd pull out the old projector and we'd watch home movies of my dad and his friends going hard from a long time ago. And that kind of is what got me inspired to try and do freestyle skiing. So yeah, definitely I think I get some of the or maybe most of the athletic genes from my dad's side of the family. I mean, his parents, my grandparents, I think they're 98 and 96 now, and they still go skiing quite a bit and play tennis and stuff. So they're pretty athletic still.
Whoa. And how about in the family? Is there any money in the family? You have two professors as parents, so I would think it's at least middle class. But what's your flat look like in Zurich and your life look like? Are you traveling a shit ton and everything's easy for Alex Hall as a youngster?
Yeah, my parents, they were off pretty well. They pay teachers a lot better in Switzerland than they do in the US. So that was one of the reasons they moved over. Granted, living in Switzerland is a lot more expensive, but we grew up in an apartment in the city for most of my life. And then I was maybe 12 or 13, and we moved like 30 minutes out of the city into a house with a little more of a backyard and just a little more outdoorsy vibe because my parents knew I was getting a little jumpy in the city, I think, in a small apartment. Not small, but it was a nice apartment, but my brother and I shared a room until we moved to that house out of the city. But definitely no struggles. Got to go to the US, once or twice a year to visit my dad's side of the family and do skiing over there. And then we'd do as much skiing as we could on the weekends around Switzerland and stuff. Mostly got to enjoy most of the things that I wanted to, which was pretty much just skiing.
Is there anything else other than just skiing? Are you playing any team sports, or is it like football and ski racing? Or what's your life there when you say it's like just skiing? Is that all you're about once you've kind of get bit by the bug?
Actually, I played a lot of soccer growing up. That's a big thing in Switzerland, to play soccer for your local district in the city or town. And, you go and play a couple times a week. It's a way for the parents to keep the kids busy. And it's really cheap to be part of a team. It's like $100 for a year. And there's like a coach that, is there like 3 times a week, and you go and then you play a weekend game. So I did that growing up until about age maybe 13 or 14. And then I'd also be trying to ski a lot because I loved them both, but they'd kind of overlap quite a bit. And then around age 13 or 14, I kind of had to decide whether I wanted to try and pursue skiing a little bit more, whether I wanted to try and pursue soccer a little more, because at that point I'd moved up from the local team to then I got to actually play for the city team, which was one of the better teams around Switzerland.
Is that a big deal, making that team?
I felt like a big deal, at least when I was, 12 or 13. I remember going to tryouts with a couple hundred kids, and they selected I think it was three or four kids from the tryouts. So I was pretty hyped, but it went from training maybe 2 or 3 times a week and one weekend game. And the training was super close to my house because it was just in my district, to then playing for the city team and training 4 to 5 times during the week, plus a weekend game. And the training facility, all the soccer fields, were way further, on the other side of the city. So I'd have to take 2 trains to get over there and skip the last half-hour class every day. So it was getting a little much. And at that point, that's really when I started to like skiing quite a bit more than soccer. So I ended up actually having to make a move and choose between the two, because the only time I could really ski was on the weekends, which is also when we had to play our games for soccer. So I was kind of in a dilemma where I couldn't choose which one I wanted, but then I really kind of knew that I enjoyed skiing more and the freedom of that. So yeah, age 13 or 14, I think I bailed on the soccer team and just started skiing as much as I could every weekend.
One thing about kids in Europe is you have a lot more freedom. You were talking about going to soccer practices and taking 2 and 3 trains. Are you able to do that with skiing? Are there ski resorts close enough where you can just hop trains and go ski?
Yeah, I'd go skiing quite a bit by train. With where we lived in town, it was actually quicker to go by car to some of the closer ski resorts. So on the weekends, usually my mom and my dad would want to go ski touring anyways. And then my brother and I would go along and get a ride that way. And most of the ski resorts were 45 minutes away from my house. But then some of the further resorts where I used to do some summer skiing at, like Sauce-Fans or Mott, which are kind of on the other side of Switzerland, are actually quicker to get to by train. It's 3 hours from my house. Driving was 5 hours, so I'd go solo by train. And yeah, I mean, pretty much everyone in most places of Europe, I feel takes public transportation. It's such a commonality over there. I think I started going to school by train at I want to say age 9 or something. I was taking the train to school. It's pretty normal to see tiny little kids on the train and stuff, or taking buses to school. So it's pretty nice to have that whole thing and not be tied down to a car. I mean, I still know some families in Zurich that I grew up with that actually don't own a car. So they just take public transit everywhere.
Yeah, it's a different world than we have here. And thinking about you, If people haven't seen you, you're 6'4", which for a skier is ridiculously tall when most people are way smaller than that. So that's one thing that's different about you than almost any other skier, especially competitive skiers out there. My assumption is that it probably took a while for you to figure out your body. I'm guessing there was probably an awkward stage for you.
Honestly, not too bad. Nothing that I really could remember where I was small and I felt kind of nimble. And then at some point I just felt really tall and lanky because I've kind of just been pretty tall since, I don't know, a pretty young age. So there was never really a stage where I had to like really adapt to it just because I've been so used to it my whole life. I feel like I've always been the tallest kid in class and stuff. So never really been a point where I've been feeling extra sketchy because I'm tall. I've kind of just been used to it, I think.
And with your style, I mean, some of the rotations that you're spinning are ridiculous. And is it tough to just keep control of the arms and keep them where you want to keep them?
Maybe. I guess that'd be a question for people who watch my skiing, whether I wave my arms around too much. But no, I don't know. For the most part, I think the main thing is just finding clothes that are big enough. I feel like a lot of time I'm like, damn, I wish my ski pants were like a size bigger or something like that. But for the most part, it's been all right. Every now and then I feel like a jump isn't super big and I still need to try and do this big trick for my slope run or big air comp. And I'm like, damn, I wish I was like 4 inches shorter. But then in the end, I think it really doesn't matter. I think being too much taller, I think in terms of being able to spin and all that stuff, as long as you're used to it, I think you can spin as much as some of the shorter guys. It just maybe comes at the cost of a sore lower back or something like that.
Now it's time for my first sponsor break, and I love the fact that I've been working with the 10 Barrel Brewery for over 4 years. While there are a lot of copycat breweries out there, 10 Barrel has supported ski, snowboard, and bike since they started in Bend back in 2006. And since then, they have not only been brewing the tastiest beers to come out of the Northwest, Profuse Juice being my favorite, but they've supported so much in action sports. Protect Our Winners, the Surfrider Foundation, and so many other rad properties and events, along with an all-time team of athletes. 10 Barrel really puts their money where their mouth is, and they do things the right way. So support the beer that supports what you do. You can find out more about the athletes, the events, and everything 10 Barrel over at 10barrel.com. My next sponsor is Stanley. You know, the brand famous for inventing the category of keeping things hot and cold way back in 1913. It's that green bottle that your grandpa used to keep his coffee hot. Well, it's camping season, and Stanley has the best, most innovative products to make your adventure better. And I'm going to save you money on your purchase. Here's what you need to do to get the discount. Head on over to stanley1913.com, go shopping, and make sure to include a set of pint glasses, which are my favorite. And when you check out, you're going to save 30%. That's right, 30%. All you need to do is enter the code DRINKFAST, that's all one word, all lowercase at checkout, and if you spend $100, I'll send you a collectible Powell Movement beanie. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. When you're a Grom, I think it's like the sweet spot for contests. Like there were so many early season big air contests and different tours for kids to check out. And when you're in Europe, are you going to those events as a spectator when you're a kid and being like, I want to be at those?
Yeah, actually, I feel like I was so lucky with the time in which kind of I was really getting into skiing and watching a lot of that stuff and even wanting to compete myself. Like the main event I'd always watch was actually an event called freestyle.ch,
Yep.
which was a super sick city big air. And that was always kind of right around the end of September. And it usually landed right on either my birthday or my brother's birthday. So that would always be our birthday present every year, would be to go to the other side of the lake and go watch that event. And I think we did that maybe 3 or 4 years in a row until they stopped doing it. And that was always so fun to go and watch all the pros and see them throw down. And that definitely inspired me a lot to try and want to do that myself. And then in terms of getting into competing too, I feel like I grew up right in a time where like they had a thing called the Swiss Free Ski Tour. I think they maybe still kind of do that, but not as much anymore. And there was like, you know, a stop every weekend or every other weekend somewhere in Switzerland where they'd have like either a big air event or a slope event or a rail jam. And it was just really fun to try to get into those events. You know, they were open events. Sometimes there was an age category and it was like, I don't know, $20 to enter. So it was like pretty cheap. And kind of when I got a little more into competing, I'd travel around a little bit and try and do some of those events. And I was competing against people like Andre Gettley and Fabian and Luca, and they were all so much better than me, but it was cool to try and, you know, compete against some kids that I'd really looked up for and that I knew were really, really good. And kind of get in the mix with them, which was pretty fun.
Yeah, when you think about who you looked up to, you mentioned a bunch of names, but is it the Euros that you're looking up to because that's where you are? Are there American guys that become your heroes and guys that you see when you're going to Park City on your trips to the U.S.?
Yeah, I think a lot of the people I was actually looking up to were probably from the US or like some of those older, more famous pros. But then there was all the younger kids from Europe that I was definitely looking up to, but also kind of, measuring myself off and seeing kind of how good they were and whether I could kind of hold up with them or compete with them, that type of thing. It was kind of more of a gauge to see where my skiing was at, which at the time was way, way below average. But then it kind of came along a little bit later.
And on those trips that you do go to the U.S. and you're able to ski at Park City and see some of the features here in the U.S. compared to the parks in Europe, are they light years ahead of what they have in Europe? Are you kind of blown away?
Yeah, I mean, I remember for sure some of the first couple years showing up and like going skiing Park City when they used to have the park over on King's Crown, and then they had that upper park. I forget what it's called, but that's what, like, I feel like back when Park City was really popping and they were making all those 4x9 edits and stuff.
Yep.
So it was pretty crazy to see all that stuff in person. But I mean, I really do think Europe at that point had already had some really sick parks. Like a resort that was a little further from my house, but that I try to go to pretty often was a place called Locks. And
Yep.
they're popping now, especially. I mean, now pretty much everyone tries to go there at least once a year. But even back then, 6-7 years ago, they were still so on point. So I was definitely pretty used to skiing some pretty dope parks. And some of the smaller local mountains a little closer to my house definitely had 3 shitty down rails or something, or like 2 boxes. But there was some parks in Switzerland that were already really, really good. Not on the level of Park City, but it's not like I was completely blown away when I showed up to Park City,
Yep. And in the States, do you make any friends in the park that you're following around? Like, are there dudes that are pushing you here in the U.S., or is that just in Europe with the dudes you know?
Yeah, I remember meeting a couple random kids at Park City, and I'd be there for a week or two and we'd lap for the week or two, but nothing too specific. Mostly I was just riding with my brother who's 2 years older than me. He's a snowboarder, and we'd have a great time just riding, the two of us. Because we'd mostly ski Park City, but then we'd also try and go to Brighton and some other resorts. But no, most of my ski group growing up was definitely in Switzerland, and those were all the kids that I skied with most of the season and knew super well. So less so than American crew. That was later when I ended up moving to Park City.
Okay, and I think the first time that people start really realizing who you are on a global level is you getting an interview on New Schoolers at 15 years old. Are you one of those kids that's on New Schoolers every day and just absorbing everything possible in skiing?
Maybe not quite, but I'd go on there most days and try and watch a bunch of ski edits. And I don't know if I was too crazy on all the forums and all that stuff, but definitely I'd try and get on there and watch as many ski videos as possible. I mean, that was back when there were so many videos coming out too. Everyone was making videos, which was awesome. Just something great to watch every day or every other day or something. So I was definitely on there and just trying to watch as many videos as I could. And I remember, yeah, trying to learn things from videos or drawing inspiration from videos. I remember that pretty well from when I was anywhere between 12 and 15 or 16.
When you get that web interview with them, is that mind-blowing for you, a really huge deal?
I can't exactly remember. I think I was definitely probably pretty hyped to get that interview. I kind of vaguely remember that actually, but I do remember some details. But no, I was definitely super stoked, and it was cool to see the interview kind of right on the homepage for a couple days. And I don't know how many people actually read it, but I was hyped for sure.
Well, New Schoolers was huge at that point. I mean, there were thousands of people, tens of thousands of people on that site every day, it seemed like. And they were killing it. I don't know what their numbers are now. I think it's kind of declined a little bit. But back then, everything that was happening within this niche of a world was on New Schoolers. There was Free Skier and Powder, and there were people that were writing articles here and there about it. But New Schoolers was dedicated to what you were doing, and it was the place to be if you wanted to get seen by your peers.
Oh, for sure. I feel like back then, New Schoolers was just popping off. So many people were online. Like I said, so many videos were being posted, and videos were getting crazy amounts of views, even just random edits and stuff. So that was super cool. I think now maybe there's less people on New Schoolers, but I do go on there every now and then. Some real good edits are posted on there, and I'll go and kind of watch some of the best ones of the week or something, or the month. And then it's always fun to watch an edit of a kid that you've never heard of. And then obviously they kill it because there's so many good kids nowadays, but I try to still get on there every now and then.
Okay. And career-wise, or not career, because like you're 15, you're not thinking career, but does it get to a point where you realize that there may be a shot for you in skiing, but like the only way you could ever know is to move to America and play where the players are?
I mean, I think I was doing pretty well in some of the Swiss events, and Switzerland had some really good talent. Like, we were kind of all the same age, like Andre Getli and Fabian Busch, and there's a lot of other really good kids.
Was David Ortlieb from there?
Yeah, he's older than me, so he wasn't competing anymore, David and Sammy, but yeah, they were in Switzerland doing some of the events and stuff. But that last season in Switzerland's when I realized that, because I wouldn't say I was doing super well, but I was right near or below some of the really, really good kids. I was like top 5 or something. So yeah, after that season, that summer, my parents and I were kind of discussing trying to do some option where I could ski a little more, because it was still kind of me just being a weekend warrior and going up and skiing every weekend and trying to do these events. But I really couldn't ski that much because I was just going to normal school.
Yep.
So then we were kind of discussing trying to do one of those, sports schools, or one of the schools where you can balance skiing and education. And then we looked at a bunch of options. Switzerland has a couple that are super good. There's one main one that all the really good Swiss kids go to in Engelberg. And I was thinking about going to that one. And then that summer, we actually came to the U.S. and I looked at the winter sports school in Park City. And then I looked at the ski school in Vail that summer. And we went and just checked out the place and saw if like that would be something we wanted to do. And then I ended up going with the Park City one just because my grandparents were living in Salt Lake. So I had some family. So it wasn't completely foreign and I'd been there before. So that fall, kind of in November, I just turned 16 maybe. I moved to the U.S. and stayed with a family there for a couple years and did the whole winter school thing. I think I did the last 2 years of high school at the winter sports school. So that was awesome to be able to fully switch into kind of ski mode and do school in the summer.
So how does that work? Because this is like the choose your adventure part of it. There's like a big fork where I don't know if you move to the winter school first and then get the email from the U.S. ski team that's saying, hey, we want you to come out to Mammoth and ski with us and see if you have what it takes. Or you get the email first and then you go to Mammoth and then go to the winter school. What's the order of that for you?
So I went to the U.S. in the fall, and then I did that first season with the Park City team. And I ended up doing a couple of the, Rev tours and some of the U.S. comps, and then ended up going to Europe in the spring for a couple of the spring events. And I think I got like a top 10 at the European Open, and then I got 7th at the Dumont Cup that spring as well. So then I think it was at the end of April, we got invited to come out to Mammoth for just like the gold camp, or I'm not exactly sure. It was like just a team camp or something. But at that point, I wasn't on the team yet. And then once I came out, they let me know that I'd made the team. And then, yeah, after that, I've been on the team ever since. So I know it's been like 5 or 6 years or something like that.
I mean, that's got to be crazy because you're like this Swiss kid who happens to be American. So you're here in the States and you get a call from the U.S. ski team saying, come out here. I mean, on the plane and everything else, is it like your Eminem moment where you're like, I have one shot, I'm coming here, I'm going to prove myself, and this trip's going to change my life? Because I would think it's got to feel that way.
I actually don't remember it being like that. I don't remember thinking too much about like the exact implications of what the trip would do to my career, what would unfold. But I remember just being so hyped to go to Mammoth because I'd always seen videos of Mammoth in the spring, and I knew it was just going to be so good. And then, yeah, that week, just the weather was amazing, and so many of us had so much fun and learned so many new tricks. And then making the team was just a cherry on top. And then with that, come so many other opportunities like camps in the fall, or being able to water ramp and just do some of these team camps. You can come to Mammoth every spring and the camp is paid for and all. It gave me so many more opportunities. And I felt like the first season that I moved to the U.S. and did the Park City team, I definitely improved my skiing quite a bit. But it wasn't until the next year that I was on the team for the first year that I felt like I really learned a lot of new tricks throughout that year and that next spring.
Do you attribute that to the coaching or just the whole program in general and the amount of time being able to spend on snow in like amazing facilities?
I don't really think it was the coaching, honestly. I think it was mostly just having so much time on snow and so many opportunities to go ski awesome parks. Like in the summer, we went to Mount Hood and skied Wendell's for like 2 weeks, and we had free access to Wendell's. And I think like most of the camp was free. Not everything, like food we still had to pay for and some of those things, but just having so much more time to ski. And then like the fall camps to Sauce Bay or down to New Zealand and
Are they all paid for? Like flights, hotel, everything? Like you don't have to bring a penny? If you had $6 in the bank, you could go on one of these trips and still make it home?
No, 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 no. Especially back then, I was on the rookie team, which is kind of the under 20 team. You get like some of the lodging paid for at some of these camps, and then like tickets are free, but then food's usually on you and travel's on you. And now that I'm on the pro team, things have kind of been changing every year, but for the most part, the lodging and all the camp fees are free, which saves us a ton of money because some of these private camps in Europe are like a couple grand for a week or something. And so that gets paid for. And then we usually still have to pay for food, but sometimes we stay in hotels, so the food's included. And then the travel has been usually on us, but then in the last couple of years, the team will pay for a couple plane tickets every now and then or give us some money to try and help with travel. And I think starting next year, they might be fully covering everything. So that would be pretty awesome because that's the case for a lot of the European countries, and the government funded ski teams have the full support, and the US is privately funded by individual donors and that sort of stuff. So they've never paid for everything, but I've heard that next season they'll be paying for everything, which would be super awesome.
Is that true across the board? Like, does the men's basketball team, all those famous basketball players, do they have to pay for their own meals too because the US is too cheap to foot the bill?
I sure doubt it. I'm pretty sure they get everything paid for and get paid a lot on top, but don't quote me. I don't know, but I don't think all U.S. teams are privately funded. I think it's just the ski team that's non-government funded. I'm sure some of the other teams are probably government funded, but I'd hope that like pro basketball players don't have to pay for their own stuff.
They could afford it more so than a skier.
Yeah, I don't really know, honestly, but I'm guessing it's probably all paid for.
Okay. And you know, a strange thing to me that I should have brought up when you said you moved to the States and live with another family is that you pretty much move out of your house when you're 16 years old. Like your parents have 16 years with you, and then you're an adult on your own in this other world. Is that strange to you, or you don't get like the full kid experience, or is that just the process of being a pro skier?
Yeah, it was definitely pretty weird moving to the US when I just turned 16 and like away from my parents. Was definitely pretty crazy, but I moved in with a family that I'd actually met a couple summers before, and I was super good friends with the son and the dad, and just the whole family was really, really friendly. So living with them was awesome. And then also I had my grandparents that lived in Salt Lake, and I have an aunt and some cousins that live there too. So I get to see some family every now and then. And then my parents still came and visited, like, in Christmas, they came and saw my grandparents, and then we got to hang out for a couple weeks. And then usually like the first couple years, even when I moved to the US, I'd still go to Europe in the spring for some of the bigger open events or some World Cups or some stuff like that. So I actually saw them more than you'd think those first couple years, but it was definitely a pretty interesting switch from living at home to just kind of being on my own for the most part.
Yeah, do you grow up fast, like learning how to manage a budget and doing shit for yourself that most kids your age don't have to think about?
Yeah, pretty much. My parents were super awesome. They still supported me into that first year that I moved to the US, but then after that, being on the team and getting some better sponsors and having some of my sponsors that I'd had for a while kind of up some deals and stuff, I was kind of on my own after that. So it was a quick transition, but my parents have always been so supportive, and especially that first year moving to the US, they helped out so much with paying for most of the stuff, and they really allowed me to kind of then take it from there and do it on my own the next year and from then on.
Well, that's what parents are supposed to do. They're supposed to support you till at least you're 18, but it sounds like they really did it till you were 17, and you had kind of spread your wings enough to where you could be on your own at 17 years old and kind of get by. I'm sure they filled in whatever gaps you need, but that's amazing. And those first couple years, it's all about Rev Tour and filming, and I think the filming part with you is something that you've always made sure you did, where there's some guys that don't film. They just compete. I mean, like if you look at the Nick Geppers of the world, they're great. They're a certain type of competitive skier, but they seem to be in it for the competitive aspect, and they could care less about being in the backcountry or breaking themselves off in an urban environment. But you've always wanted to do that. And is that just like the froth that you've always had? Is just like you've always got to be doing something on skis?
Yeah, it's definitely that. I think especially when I first moved to the US and when I was younger, I was just so hungry to always try to do something productive, whether it was learn new tricks or get out and film or be at an event. But I think a lot of it still just comes from looking up to some of those idols that I had when I was younger and still do, who, have been able to balance competing and filming. I've just always thought that's so special. And I think competing's so intense and it's really fun, but also kind of gnarly. But I respect people so much who just do competing because personally, I think I just wouldn't be able to just compete because I think I'd get burned out. So having the balance of competing a lot of the season, but then also trying to film whenever I have free time has been really awesome. And that's kind of what has kept me so in love with the sport and so hyped to ski is having that balance. And you always learn so many things competing or filming. There's always so many things to work on or so many new things to learn. And I've learned that especially probably even more so with filmings. There's always so many things you can improve on or weak spots in your skiing, and trying to be as well-rounded a skier as possible is a lot of the time what I've always kind of strived to be able to do, mostly because those OGs who used to do it. And there's still a couple skiers like Henrik who are just amazing at doing that. But to each their own, for the people who only like to compete, I really respect that because that's super gnarly. And you got to have a pretty special grit to do that as well, So it's just not quite for me to do just the comp thing.
Now it's time for my final sponsor break, and Peter Glenn Ski and Sports is teaming up with Rollerblade for a giveaway that will roll you out into summer in style. That's right, Peter Glenn is giving away both a men's and women's pair of Macro Blade 100s. These blades create a smooth roll on all surfaces thanks to a fast 100mm wheel, and they still offer the support and comfort that you've come to expect from the Rollerblade brand. No one else in inline skates comes close. To enter the contest, here is what you need to do. First, follow Peter Glenn and Rollerblade on Instagram. Second, like the Rollerblade giveaway post. And third, tag 2 friends who would be stoked to roll on a pair of Macro Blades. There's only one entry per person, and the winner will be drawn on May 28th. To find out more about all things Peter Glenn, head on over to peterglenn.com. My final sponsor this break is Rollerblade. Yes, inline skating is back. Actually, it never went anywhere. And it's one of the best full-body workouts out there, especially for skiers and snowboarders. Why? Inline skating not only burns about as many calories as biking and running does in an hour, but compared to a bike, inline is the no-hassle option. You don't need a rack, and you can travel with them. And you can't even compare inline to running based on the punishment that running puts on your knees. Plus, inline skating is super fun. To find out more about the inline skates, check out rollerblade.com, or you can get their award-winning Ski to Skate app over on the App Store. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. The risk level at both is just ridiculous. I mean, if you're a comp skier, which you are, every year there's another rotation, it's another flip, and the risk is just so ridiculous where you can't even really train for a lot of these things, it doesn't seem like, unless you have an airbag. The trampoline with taped edges, that doesn't really work anymore. Then you go into the streets, and the hammers in the streets are so different because they're so unpredictable. They're not manicured park jumps. And what's the motivation with the type of hammers that you're doing? I see getting clips and putting together cool edits, but it's like you're at the step level of gnarly, it seems like, which is the top of the game when it comes to that. Is that the goal?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I think just having fun is the main thing. And I know that sometimes skiing urban may not seem fun, and a lot of the time it can be really, really gnarly, but there's a certain reward you get for getting the shot. And a lot of the sessions actually really fun, especially when you're surrounded by people who are really hyped to be there and hyped to help you out, get the shot or whatever. But no, a lot of the motivation for me just comes from wanting to put out something special in terms of a video, not even necessarily for other people, but more just for myself, to know that I can kind of achieve this level of skiing that I can't necessarily tap into for competition skiing. Because a lot of the times in comps, you're doing tricks that you've hopefully done a couple times before for the rails and slopestyle runs. You can't always, do the gnarliest or hardest trick possible because you got to aim for a certain level of consistency, which is where the urban comes in and is so fun because you can do these tricks that you never ever get to do in the park or in a slope run or a rail jam because they're just so hard and they take so many tries, and it can be so satisfying to get that shot and then put it all together with so many other shots that you've worked for so hard. It's just there's a level of personal satisfaction that's just unmatched, I think, in any area of skiing. And then hopefully people will appreciate it too and realize how much hard work you put into it. But that comes second for me, at least. It's first and foremost is just trying to put something out that I am personally really, really hyped on and that I know that I pushed myself to the limit to get those shots that I did.
Do sponsors appreciate that? I mean, I'm sure there's some that pay you because they want to see you on the podium and they expect that from you. But do they look at all the other stuff you do as an added bonus, or do they really care about that stuff as well? Or does it depend on the sponsor?
It definitely depends on the sponsor. I'd say for the most part, a lot of the sponsors probably care more about the competition side of things because some of that stuff's on TV and kind of that aspect. But I'm not 100% sure, but I'd say most of the sponsors I have also really appreciate some of the videos that I put out. And I think it just kind of adds to the personal image or overall work of a skier to have all these past video parts to look back on and see all this crazy kind of footage or all this crazy stuff that you've achieved over the years is just kind of cool to have as part of your ski career. I mean, for perspective, a lot of like the first video that my friend and Hunter and I made, Magma, that was just out of pocket, we just did it because we wanted to do it. And we ended up, spending a couple $1,000s to pay our filmer and be in Hood for the summer and all that stuff. And we never saw any of that money get back to us, but we just did it because we really wanted to put out something epic and hope that people would enjoy it and had such a good time doing it. And then I think filming a lot of the trips, what people don't realize is that they can be gnarly, but there's so many moments that are so memorable and fun that even if you're not necessarily making as much money as you would win in every comp out there, for me, it's still completely worth it.
Well, there's some people that don't have the luxury of contest winnings that they can put into film projects, but you do have that luxury. And on the business end of things, when you're first getting started, I wouldn't think the dollars are huge. It's like you have to prove yourself. So with contracts in the beginning, are they all like 1-year deals for little money and big incentive? And it's like, prove yourself?
Yeah, I mean, for the start, it was mostly just like 1-year deal and maybe a little bit of money. And, the incentives weren't too crazy either, just some incentives here and there, but definitely stuff that was achievable. And it was cool because a lot of my sponsors had smaller incentives, but they were also for smaller events, like events that I was in at that time. So there weren't necessarily too many incentives for like X Games or all these huge events because they knew I wasn't in them, but there was some smaller incentives for some of the smaller comps, which was really cool. But yeah, for the start, nothing too crazy. And then once I made the US team in the spring, I think that following summer, I signed on with Tommy Apps, who's my agent. And for having all the connections and all that stuff, he was able to get me some new sponsors and kind of up some of my past deals and all that stuff. And I'd say that's kind of when all that stuff started kicking in a little more. And then a lot of the stuff was just on a gradual increase for the most part over a couple years where I was starting to get some better results and do better at some World Cups and bigger events. But I think the main thing that a lot of sponsors care about is the really big events and doing well at the really big events. So as soon as you can kind of achieve that, like X Games or some of the World Cups, and that's really when I feel like the switch gets flipped and you can really start living comfortably and doing the trips you want to do and maybe do the film trip you've wanted to do that you have to pay for or something along those lines. So it's been awesome to have a little more freedom.
Yeah, there's a little bit of leverage. The ball's in your court when you start winning. And I think it's interesting with the brands that you're on. You're on Faction. And I would think that it's more core of being with that amazing team that they've put together and being able to travel a shit ton. And maybe you're not going to make as much cash as a brand from the Rosignol's of the world, but you aren't selling out either. You're being with the brand that you want to be with. But when I think of selling out, in the beginning, I feel like you're on Adidas eyewear. And I can't remember the last time I saw any piece of Adidas eyewear that I thought was cool. Was that one for the money?
No, that one wasn't for them. That one was for free goggles. I think I was like 14 when I did that one. That was a zero money deal. I think I was just trying to get as much free gear as I could so I didn't have to pay for it or so my parents didn't have to pay for it. So I think I must have been 13 or 14 when I had that one. And I think I had the goggles for like a year or two, but definitely never got paid for that one. That's for sure.
Okay. And now it looks like you're developing eyeglasses or an eyewear line with Spider, and there's a ton of potential here. My question is, how does a brand that you're involved with have a product named SP6013? Do you have a part in naming these products?
No. The names of the products, I think they've just kind of been standardized. I'm not exactly sure. They were like that when I came in, and I don't think I have too much pull on the name exactly, but it's been super cool to try and work on some things. And hopefully by this fall or next year, we're going to have some pro model goggles and some speed shades that I'm pretty hyped on. And I'm not sure what the name is going to be there, but hopefully something involving my name, I would assume. We haven't gotten that far, but for the rest of the names, I'm not exactly sure how they came about those, but I don't have too much pull in some of those things. And I think Spider Eyewear is kind of just getting started the last couple years. So I think they still got some stuff to learn and kind of some things to adjust, but it's been super awesome actually working with them and trying to get my own visions going with some of their product, which has been super fun.
Well, they've been amazing to skiing forever, so it's a great brand to be associated with, and I think you can help them with that product naming. Who else pays you to ski?
Faction, who have been the best. They were my first sponsor ever. It's been sweet working with them probably like 10 years now.
And they're a different kind of company, right? Is it like a public company? How do they work? It's not like I don't know how it's run, but I think it's different than most ski brands.
I don't know. I mean, I know there's a CEO, maybe co-partnered CEOs for Faction, and they're both from Europe. And it's been the same guys for quite a bit now, but I don't really know exactly the behind the scenes too much with the company and how all that stuff works, but they've been amazing to work with. And the team has been so awesome, and they've been doing film trips for as long as I can remember, pretty much being on their team, always getting to go on these really cool film trips, which I feel like has opened a lot of doors for me. So that's been really epic. And then, yeah, Rockstar Energy and Spider Eyewear and Spider Outerwear and Wells Lamont as well. They make gloves. They've been super sweet. They have a really cool team come together. They sponsor a bunch of really awesome athletes. That one's pretty much just to be a part of a cool team and get some free gloves for the most part, but that's been a really cool addition as well.
Anybody else?
I hope I'm not missing too many others. I think that's it.
Okay. Well, it sounds like you're known for living a pretty cheap life. Like you'll sleep in a car, you'll sleep on a couch. Do you just stack all your money in the bank and let it sit? Or do you have a guy managing your money so you can eventually retire and not have to worry about it? How do you operate?
Yeah, for the most part, I just try not to spend too much money. I'll for sure won't like hold back if it's something I really want, like a new surfboard or kind of that sort of stuff. I'll go in on that stuff. But for the most part, yeah, I just throw it in the bank and try and keep it invested and not just let it sit there. Make some moves, but nothing too crazy, and spend money when I feel like I want to or need it. But for the most part, nothing too extravagant on my end.
So like if you buy a surfboard, you're going to get it and then you're going to go in your truck wherever, sleep in your truck and go surf in the morning. And that's just how you are.
Yeah. It's a Subaru Outback that I usually just sleep in. And I love sleeping in my car. You can kind of pull up wherever, anywhere along the West Coast. And it's fun. I love having the freedom of just being able to move from spot to spot, depending on where the surfing is good, and sleeping in my car. And I don't do it necessarily to save money or anything. It's more just because I really enjoy it. And a lot of time I'll be doing it with friends who are also sleeping in their cars or camping. So it works out super nice.
Okay. Well, we're going to get back to your ski career. 2017, I think it's like your rookie year in the big leagues. Like you competed in pro contests before, but now you're on the World Cup level and you're traveling the world and your best slope finish is 9th. Is it just nerves? Is it not having the tricks? Is it not being able to land a run? What's going on at that point in your life?
It's probably a combination of a couple of those things. Back then, for sure, I didn't quite have the biggest tricks. I feel like to be kind of a threat to the podium. And I think a lot of it also just comes with competition experience. I mean, being young, there's not really any pressure on you because you're just trying to do your best, but there's just so many things that you learn along the way as you kind of get more experience with competing, whether it comes to a specific trick selection or what might work if the weather is shitty, or just, I think also a big part is once you do well, you kind of know that it's achievable and that you've been there before and it's a kind of a familiar feeling. And then once you've done it before, you really feel like you can achieve it again. Whereas the first time cracking that top 3 or the big next levels can seem far-fetched, but then once you do it, it all feels a little more attainable. So I think that definitely comes into play as well. But yeah, I think just a lot of learning those first couple years, and I was still pretty young competing against some of the guys who'd been a part of it for a long time and who were really, really good. So maybe just wasn't quite there with my skiing as well.
Yeah, and I think a highlight, though, is you get invited to the X Games in Aspen. And while you don't make the finals at the event, I'm sure you're frustrated a little bit, but is it more like you're stoked, too, that you know you're going to be back?
Yeah, the first time was definitely crazy. I'm sure it's the same for everybody, but it was so cool to be a part of. And obviously, I wish I would have done better, but I was still pretty young and I was all right with how I did. I didn't do amazing, but I kind of put down a run and could have cleaned it up. But I was just hyped to be a part of it. And I remember thinking like, oh, I really hope I can, get in the next couple years. And luckily I got some other good results that helped me get in every year. But yeah, just being a part of it for the first time was epic. And I definitely had a rough go the first, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 X Games that I was a part of. I don't think I ever even made finals. And then I started doing a little better. I think I got 4th at a
Norway
big air event. In Norway. I think that was maybe 2018, like kind of in the summer of 2018, I got fourth. And then that kind of got me stoked. And then it all came together in Aspen that next season.
Yeah, I mean, 2018 is when things happen for you. You win your first big event, you win a World Cup in Switzerland. And that's got to be where the confidence starts to build when you're like, shit, I won this event with all the best in the world here. And it's like a home event for you because you grew up there. I mean, is it best weekend of your life?
Yeah, I was super stoked. I remember being like, whoa, this is kind of the first big one I've won. And I remember the weather kind of sucked. So I had a little bit of luck there because especially back then, I didn't maybe have the biggest jump tricks, but I was pretty solid on the rails. So I was able to lay down a good rail run and then put together some pretty decent jumps and ended up taking it in kind of some shitty weather. But I remember being really hyped, and that's definitely kind of when I feel like the confidence hit the next level and I felt like I could kind of keep on going with the momentum.
The next year, you have to learn bigger tricks because that's what you do. Every year, everything has to be upgraded and better because that's what it takes to win and podium every year. And you've been one to do that. But the one thing that you haven't really done is been injured that much. And most people I have on these podcasts will have a 10-minute list of injuries. What's your injury list?
I broke my collarbone when I was 12 sledding, but that's the only one, knock on wood.
Yeah.
So it's been good.
Yeah, so that's an amazing thing. And what's next in your career coming up is trying to make the Olympic team. And one of the hardest things to do, I feel like, is to make the U.S. team because there's so many great American skiers and there's only like 4 spots that are going to be available for the Olympic team. And at that point, you're starting to stack points. You're starting to win events, starting to get on the podium. But the competition's fierce. And it's the year I think everyone thought Bobby Brown was going to go and he didn't go. How and when did you earn your spot?
Yeah, that was crazy. Leading up to that, I'd had a couple decent results, nothing too crazy. And then the first qualifier for that Olympics was Dew Tour in December, and I ended up actually getting 5th in Dew Tour. And I think the only American above me was Nick, who I think got 2nd or maybe 1. But right off the bat, I kind of put myself up there, which was crazy. I don't think anyone was really expecting that. And then we had 5 qualifiers before the Olympics that year, and I ended up doing really bad at the next 3. I think I didn't really land a run, or I don't even know if I was making finals really. So I had one really good result, but they take your 2 best results into account for the ranking list for the U.S. team. So it all came down to the final event in Mammoth, and I needed a pretty good result. I think I had to get at least a top 5. So I remember I was pretty nervous and definitely was feeling a lot of pressure because I knew if I could maybe get a top 5, I could hopefully get on the team and get that last spot. And I somehow ended up getting 4th and getting the spot that way. But I was definitely pretty hyped and surprised. And I think some people were definitely surprised because I had that real good result right at the start. And then I lacked a little and then turned it around right at the end. But that was a super crazy experience to be a part of that team and go there with Nick, Gus, and McRae, who were all so experienced and quite a bit older than me. It was pretty fun and interesting kind of being the young gun on that team.
Yeah, what kind of things are you not prepared for when you go to the Olympic Games?
Honestly, it wasn't too crazy. The main thing was, for me at least, was kind of, we really didn't get to ski that much, which I was kind of frustrated at. We had a couple of training days in the competition day, but I think we were there for 2.5 weeks or 3 weeks. And except for the days on the course, I think I only skied like 1 or 2 other days, like the local little park at the local resort. Yeah, I felt like a big chunk of the season where I wish I would have been skiing, but I wasn't. But a lot of the other stuff wasn't too crazy to get used to. I mean, things like the opening ceremony were absolutely insane, with the crowd, and the whole kind of spiel was just crazy. And I think being the youngest on the team by quite a bit was a little interesting too, where I almost felt like, not that I wasn't part of the crew because everyone's so awesome, but maybe I kind of felt like I was a little in a different spot with life and kind of where I was at in my skiing, where I was just kind of there to try and hopefully do my best, whereas the rest of the guys were all so good. And McRae had, won world champs the year before, and Nick was getting podiums, Gus was getting podiums, where they were all really pretty set on trying to get a medal and do really, really well, where I was kind of hopefully just going to ski my best and enjoy my time there and kind of use it as a learning experience. So I think we were in pretty different mindsets, but it was still really special to be there with those guys and kind of enjoy that couple weeks and get to watch all the other crazy stuff that comes along with it, all the other events, watch hockey and whatnot, and some of the half pipe and snowboard events. It was super cool to just enjoy watching some sports that I usually don't get to watch in person.
You know, the event doesn't really go down how you would dream it, but like you said, you were so young and there's time ahead of you. And the crazy thing is, I interviewed Bobby Brown like 5 years ago. We were at Mount Hood. It was a similar point in his career as you are in yours now. He had placed ninth at his first Olympic Games. He was prepping to qualify for the next Olympics, which you ended up taking a spot that he really wanted. But when I talked to him, he really believed that barring injury, there was no way he wasn't going to make it. Now, you are in the same position he is, a favorite to make the team. Do you think about that a lot? Like there's pressure on you to make the next Olympic team, or do you try to just not even think about that shit now?
Yeah, I just try to not think about it too much. The Olympics is so special and it's obviously a huge event, but in the end, I still kind of treat it as one event, you know, and I wouldn't think about the X game that much like the whole summer before and be stressed out about that one 30-second run that I'm going to do. So I've been trying to just not think about it too much and take it easy in terms of, you know, putting pressure on myself. Cause I think if I put too much pressure on myself, I just won't have as much fun and enjoy it as much. So kind of not think about it too much and just always ski my best. And then hopefully it ends up going my way. But obviously the talent pool is so deep in the US. There's so many really good young kids nowadays coming up that you never know what's going to happen. But yeah, just ski my best next year and always try to progress my skiing and hopefully it works out. But if it doesn't, it's not the end of the world. I'm really hyped that I got to experience it once and we'll see what happens, but definitely, hopefully not stressing too much. Actually, funny story was we had our first Olympic qualifier this season in Aspen. It was a World Cup and we did the whole qualifying day and I didn't even know it was an Olympic qualifier. And then the morning of finals, someone was talking about how it was an Olympic qualifier and I wish I hadn't known because it gave me another thing to think about. But yeah, I haven't been thinking about it too much and getting too stressed about it, which has been nice this year.
Yeah, I mean, I look at what you've been doing for the past couple of years because 2019, the whole year, you're on fire. You start with like a silver in the World Cup in Italy, gold in France, you get the X Games, and your confidence is like never before. And while I'm sure the goal is to win slopestyle, the big air, and the knuckle huck, or it would be nice to win all of those, the slopestyle is the one that means the most because it means you're not just a one-trick pony and you can put together a full line. And I mean, is that kind of something that when you win your X Games medal, there's relief and it kind of validates everything that your competitive career's been about up until that point?
Yeah, I mean, definitely slopestyle is the one that I've always looked up to the most. And I think for a lot of people, when we talk about it, like that's the really big one. To win, like you said, you have to just be a really well-rounded skier and not just land one big trick. But yeah, I mean, after that one, definitely it was like, that's kind of a big box checked right there. You know, it's been something that I've always dreamed of doing and finally being able to do that was amazing. I don't know if it kind of relieved any pressure off my shoulders or any of that because I don't know if there really ever was too much pressure to like go out there and necessarily win the X Games, but it was definitely kind of felt like a huge achievement and just being able to check that off the bucket list was amazing and then try and just build off that. But I don't know if I've ever really held myself to like having these extremely specific goals of winning really specific comps. So it was just more really cool and special to win that event.
Gotcha. And I wouldn't say really specific comps. I would think the goals that would come for like X Games and the Olympics. And other than that, they're all just comps. But I would think those are the two that stand out.
Yeah, for sure. The goal is to do well at those. But like I said, there's so much more to skiing where I don't want to just confine myself to telling myself that I just want to do well at these events because there's so much more to it with the whole filming side of things too. So I'd say I probably have almost more goals when it comes to specific tricks in filming and urban and powder and that sort of stuff.
I love that attitude and just the way your thought process is because it's not all about contests, even though you happen to win a lot of those. And in 2020, you start the season with a big air win in Italy. You win the big air contest in Georgia, which is crazy because there's a big air contest in Georgia. Who does that? I think the U.S. ski team does. It's to bring awareness to skiing in an area where maybe they might not see it that often. And when you do a big stadium event like that, is there entertainment other than the skiers there? Like, do they have a concert there? And are you able to meet the talent at these concerts? Do you get that kind of luxury being an athlete?
Yeah, so Atlanta, actually, there wasn't any kind of other entertainment, but that was a really sweet one. I think that might be one of the biggest crowds I've ever skied in front of. I think it was like 19,000 people or something there for the free ski big air finals. So it's just really special to ski in front of a crowd that big. And then taking the win and it being in the U.S. was amazing. But there was no kind of side events there. That's more something they do at X Games, which is really awesome. They have a ton of different artists who always show up there. Like, I think the year I won in Slopestyle in 2019, I remember watching Lil Wayne like that same night perform, which was amazing, and all these other concerts. And I feel like I'm not really a huge concert guy, so it's nice to try and rack them up when they show up to X Games or some of those events and be able to partake in that stuff, because usually I'm not doing too much of that stuff.
All right. Well, I'm going to end this thing, not going to end it really, but I'm going to end my portion of it thinking that you kind of seem like a throwback guy in the way that you're like a ski bum. You'll sleep in cars and couches, and you'll put together video parts and compete. You do everything. Do you party like the old school guys as well? Like, do you like to go out and throw down a little bit, or are you just a full-on athlete who's training a lot? How do you work in that respect?
No, I'm pretty mellow. I wouldn't say I'm like the crazy party animal. I'll definitely like go out if all the homies are going out. I'll go out and have a couple beers, but the hangover is just worse than having a really good night. So I just always think about how the hangover the next day isn't really going to be worth it. So I try, and sometimes I'll have a couple beers or something, but I try and keep it pretty mellow so I can wake up the next morning, feel fresh, and hopefully go ski or do something productive with my day. So I'm not a massive party guy, that's for sure.
All right. Well, I figured I would check that out. This brings me to the last part of the podcast. I call it inappropriate questions. I get someone that you know to ask you 3 questions, and they can be anything. And I thought the best person to get was someone that has something that you want, but you don't have yet. And I was able to get Olympic gold medalist Josh Christensen to ask 3 questions. And are you ready for what Josh has to ask?
Maybe. That's hilarious. I'm excited. Yeah, I don't know if I'm ready.
All right. Well, we will see what he's got to ask.
Alex, have you and your girlfriend Emma Hall ever gotten an ancestry test just to make sure there's no possible relation? Because sometimes I believe you guys look a little similar.
Yeah, so that's a funny question. My girlfriend and I have the same last name, so I usually get a bunch of shit for that. People make fun of me for that, but no, we actually haven't. Maybe that'd be a thing to do, but I'm pretty certain there's no relationship there, no correlation between our families, but might be something to double check on.
Does she like to pretend that you guys are married because you guys have the same last name everywhere you go?
Not too much, I don't think. I think sometimes she'll kind of make a joke out of it, but for the most part, it's just kind of a funny thing that most people make fun of us for.
Yeah, I would definitely make fun of you for that too. It is a little weird, but whatever. It's just a last name.
Yeah, it's true.
Let's go with question number 2.
Question number 2 would be, you have an infamous laugh after landing big tricks or wild tricks. Is it something you find very funny to yourself, or is it kind of a form of a subtle brag?
What did you say? I usually laugh?
Yeah, after you land a trick. And it seems like you laugh after every question I ask, so I'm wondering if you just laugh a shit ton, or he thinks that maybe that laugh could be a subtle brag.
I don't know. Maybe I'm trying to be too nice. No, I don't know. I think I just get really hyped when I land something that maybe I was scared to do or didn't think I was necessarily going to get. So I usually just kind of let it out, let all the excitement out as a laugh. Maybe it's a subtle brag. I try not to make it a subtle brag, I think. But I think it's just some emotions or something going on. So I guess that's my answer.
Is it just a big trick that gets the laugh out of you, or is it any trick that you land?
I don't know. I think it's just the big trick. I don't think I'm going and doing a cork 3 and just laughing my ass off on the ride out. I think it's mostly just something big and scary that I maybe haven't done before, something that took me a bunch of tries, and just maybe the sense of relief that I just got to let it out as a little laugh every now and then. But I hope I don't do it after every trick. That'd be a little annoying.
Yeah, that would be like the claim every time. No one likes to see that. But every once in a while, it's okay.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, we will go with his final inappropriate question.
Alex, would you ever play a game of slush again? Or are you scared of losing, or do you think that we're just out here to hurt you?
No, I'm down to play a game of slush again, actually. The Slush Cup in Andorra is always like the most fun week of the season, I'd say. Like all the homies get together and just throw down. I think in the past I've maybe tried a little too hard on slush games and end up wrecking myself or doing something dumb. But I think if I played one in the future, I'd kind of just be along for the ride, enjoy it, and hopefully land some tricks. And if not, it'd be all good. But I'm super down, especially the Slush Cup in Andorra is always such a good time. So I'd love to do that one again if it lines up with the schedule and filming and all that crazy stuff, which it usually does because it's in the spring. So hopefully once COVID is done, we get to do that again.
And you won that whole thing the second year, right?
I don't know what year it was, but I won 1 year in Andorra, which was super awesome. And then I ended up doing one or two more. I think I did one in Perisher and then another in Andorra. And then since then, I haven't done one. I think they did one more year, which didn't line up because I was out filming and then COVID hit. But I'd be super excited to do it. If they ever do it again, I think we got to ask Joss whether he's down to do slush games because we haven't seen too many as of lately. So it'd be awesome to get some of those going again.
Well, I will say that we've been in a global pandemic, and that probably the reason there haven't been in-person slush games, but that's just me saying that. And with Joss asking that question, I would hope that he would bring it back because you're definitely in, so we might as well make that happen.
I'm down. I hope it happens again. And yeah, the COVID thing's definitely been hard for slush, and I hope they bounce back good.
All right, man. Well, I want to thank you for your time. When I look at your career, it's been so short, man. It's like you're 22 years old, I think, or 23, or you're really, really young. But you've already got a bunch of X Games hardware. You've already got a bunch of video parts out there. You've got Magma 2. Are you talking about producing something else video-wise?
We're planning on doing a Magma 3 at some point in the future. We just kind of had to take a break here this year. But no, I really appreciate that. And hopefully put a long urban edit out this fall because I filmed a lot for the real ski and then I kept filming after that was due. So hopefully just a big long urban edit and get all that footage online at some point this fall. But that's about it.
Awesome, man. Well, that's something for everyone to look forward to. I thank you for your time, and that's our podcast.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike. I really appreciate it. Have a great one.
So that was time with Alex Hall, and what a nice, respectful, positive young guy he is. And to tell you the truth, this podcast worried me. Having a guest on who is so young usually means that while he's won contests, that there's a chance that he hasn't done much in life other than that, and that could make for a boring show. And while this one didn't have any real drama, it had enough meat on it to keep it interesting. And Alex is so young that his story is only going to get better as he does more with his life. But what he's done so far has been amazing. That's the podcast. Now it's time for me to do the review of the week. And this week, it's another 5-star review titled Adding Dementiality to Action Sports Superheroes. And it comes from Greg Ober. Here's the review. While being an avid skier and listening to so many podcasts that are related to the industry, this one is consistently the best. Mike has an amazing talent to walk through someone's life and uncover so many little factoids. It's like a big magnet being cast over someone's existence and pulling out large, deep pieces of character. His due diligence and research process is uncanny. Keep up the great work, Mike. I look forward to more in the future. Best, Greg. Thank you, Greg. I really appreciate your review, and I love it when you notice the attention to detail and the attention to the research that I put into these things, because that really is what separates, I feel like, my podcast from the rest, is I put so much time in ahead of time to make sure that while I may know these people personally already, I know all the little details that are so hard to get anywhere else. And when I can bring that all to the table, it's nice to hear the interview subject actually recognize that, which happens a lot in my podcast, where they're like, whoa, how did you even know that? Those are the type of things that get me stoked on a podcast, when a guest recognizes how deep I'm going on the information. And I try to do that every week. So thank you for noticing, Greg. You will get yourself a beanie if you email me at mike@thepowellmovement.com. I'll need your mailing address and I will ship one out. For listeners who want a beanie, I know it's getting to be summertime, but some people wear beanies year round. And you can do that by buying one on my website at thepowellmovement.com. Or you can write a review of the week. And all you need to do to write a review is grab your smartphone, hit the podcast icon, search for the Powell Movement, click my logo when you see it, scroll down to where you see the stars. When you see all the stars and reviews, you can click 5 stars, write the review you think I deserve, and submit it. If I read it on the podcast, you are eligible for a free beanie, and I greatly appreciate it. I believe reviews and ratings help the podcast grow. I can't say I know that for sure, but I do know that it makes me feel great every time I read a good review. And when I read a bad one, it does piss me off a little bit. And that's funny as well. So from here, I want to thank you for listening. I want to ask you to support my amazing sponsors who really do make this thing happen. They are the 10 Barrel Brewery, Stanley, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, and Rollerblade. Have a great week, everyone.